Hey everyone, welcome to UNIQUEWAYS with Thomas Girard, a more than audio podcast. We've got a really great guest on today here in the Vancouver Cambie Village podcast recording studio. His approach to his driving growth involves leading design teams to deliver immediate value to customers and clients through close collaboration with merchants and internal stakeholders. He leverages his hard-earned international business experience and deep understanding of consumer behavior and excels at creative and collaborative problem solving, formulating design strategies, and executing them through creative leadership. Please join me in welcoming here in the studio, John Bondoc. Welcome, John.
Thanks.
Ready for returning to the 20 questions?
Yeah. I guess, just so you know, I changed after the last podcast, I changed my LinkedIn bio because I realized that it was a bit strange.
Oh, that's so good.
Yeah.
I'm so glad.
Yeah, I know. Sorry, you had to do that again.
Okay.
Maybe it'd be better just to say what I do right now and then
Sure. I mean, that's essentially question one, right? Tell me a little bit more about yourself. What do you do?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No. So, I'm a designer. I've been designing stuff for a really long time. Right now, I work in AI. I work for a software company that specializes in deploying AI solutions out here in Vancouver called UNIQUEWAYS. So, big plug to the company. Great company, good people. We do great work. Amazing data science team. Obviously, UX team and design team. So. UNIQUEWAYS, we work with some local companies here, companies in the States, all over the place. Some of the teams are working on crypto stuff. And we do a lot of rad things. And right now AI is a big deal. I got in with a company just before all this ChatGPT stuff blew up, just because I've been fascinated by AI anyway. And so here I am doing AI and design work, and how design fits in with AI. So there's actually a lot to talk about there, a lot to unpack. It changes all the time. But is that...
Yeah, that's great. And a couple notes for our audience. So John and I met on a panel at an art fair here in Vancouver, kind of a private sector-y art fair here called Art Vancouver. You guys should check that out. Also check out other AI episodes like the one with Dr. Philippe Pasquier, who runs the AI lab, the creative side of the AI lab at Simon Fraser University here in Vancouver. Great. So question 2 is, what's a key piece of knowledge that makes you different?
Wow. I've actually been thinking about this a lot.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily about me, it's just trying to come up with some type of framework in dealing with AI and our value systems and things like this. And as you know, everybody's been talking about AI for a really long time. Not a really long time, but intensely, maybe for a short period of time. That's probably a better way of putting it.
Yeah.
And what is a unique perspective on that? Like, what can I contribute? I think about this a lot because, working in technology, you end up with this, imposter syndrome a lot. You probably experienced that at your time as a scholar as well, where it's just all like, you're kind of wondering, how do I contribute and all of this? And, and I jam a lot with AI chatbots, fleshing out ideas together, collaborating on brainstorming and things like that. And we were talking the other day, and it was just, we were talking about these questions like why, why are we here? What gives us purpose? Because the AI also, AIs in general, have goals, right? And so that purpose can be kind of programmed into them. And for me, it's kind of interesting to think about, if you were to program someone or something to do anything, what is the most valuable? And when one of those things is learning, the most important thing to do is to seek out new data. And so the most prized thing a new being, especially an advanced being, could do is seek out newness and new data and to prize that. And so I was talking to another friend of mine, not an AI friend, but another friend, about how we could turn that into some type of, almost like a religion, you know what I mean? And it checks a lot of boxes, respect for new data, new experience. It values everyone's experience, you know, whether that may be, you know, someone like Elon Musk or someone who's very wealthy, to someone who's, you know, born in the slums of, you know, a developing or third world country. Every one of those experiences are valuable. And then also it applies to nature as well, you know. The systems and organisms that are novel, new, that learn, all of these things need to be protected, right? And coming up with that type of framework versus, you know, the existing narratives that we have right now around value and spirituality tend to underplay. There's a very heavy human bias there. And so I'm playing around with that. And so that ties in with your question, which is, yeah, keep these knowledge that makes you different. I'm all about anything that makes anyone different. You know what I mean? Is super valuable. And so I'm still playing around with that. I hope it turns into some sort of, I don't know, I've been playing around with the idea of contributing, you know, to, you know, the canon by being some sort of, I'm thinking of going into, so if there are any anybody that's running any philosophy labs out there or whatever, that's interested in taking me on, I'm thinking about doing a PhD. That'd be dope. Get me, hit me up. Yeah, so I've been kind of looking into that. Maybe, I don't know, or just keep doing what I'm doing, which is, you know, again, it's attached to enterprise, but I don't know. I've been playing around with it. I think there's a lot there, and I think it'd be a nice way to cap off a career. But anyway, there's a lot of talking. Sorry, Thomas. I know the rest of it. I was telling him, I was like, hey, yeah, you know, is this next one going to be a little bit, it's just because I feel bad. I talk a lot. He's like, no, the next one's going to be a lot more conversational.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, dead. And then now I just talked for 15 minutes.
Yeah. And, you know, we had Marcy on, and his was about like an hour and a half, this was a great episode. It was just quite long. No, I'm just thinking about AI because there's this kind of meme-ish thing that came through my feed about what would happen if a conversational AI and an inbox AI were talking to each other. Would it be like this endless conversation? And that was interesting to me, but I feel like that's also kind of emblematic of where we are with thinking about AI at this stage. Like those are maybe the kinds of questions that we're at the time of this recording. So I think it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that idea of an AI, because it sounds like you're thinking of it as a stop and start kind of thing. One thing to note is that for some of these models, they continue to work even if they're not plugged into anything. And so that part is fascinating. And so, yeah, definitely if it was plugged into something, it'd be reacting to something, but the more interesting models are the ones that continue to churn and optimize themselves when they've been cut off from input. And that is, to me, interesting. I don't want to say frightening because it's not. I mean, it's not. I think it's exciting. I think, you know, I'm not a technician, but like from a design perspective, bordering on philosophy perspective, once you have a system that is self kind of perpetuating, I guess it might be a good word, then the questions need to be different.
Because you started out at Art Center, right? And that must have been like a very different world than this AI world that you're in now, right?
Yeah, so before Art Center, I was actually at UBC, and I have an undergrad in psychology. So the things I was fascinated with were cognitive psychology, social psychology, and neuropsychology. And so tying in the physical, like neuron to neuron kind of thing, like neural networks essentially, to our behavior, set me up for creativity, like, you know, at a career in creativity. And so at Art Center, and my entire design practice is fueled by kind of the demystification of creativity and authorship. I tend to believe that creativity can be distilled into a formula, you know. But I also, don't get me wrong, I mean that might sound like a provocation, but I mean I also believe that like our concept of soul and sentience can be, you know, distilled into mechanisms within our brain. Like if we were to get into it, if we were to track neuron by neuron activation and the patterns thereof, and obviously all the other systems that are associated with that, affecting the weights of those things, including hormones, including electrical fields, including chemicals in the brain, then I think the soul, and even the concept or the spirit can be explained in those things. And so creativity is just one part of that. And I think recently with these new developments, we're starting to see that creativity can possibly be replicated by a machine.
Nice. That's great. Okay, number 3. Why this of all things? Why do you do what you do?
Well, so this is part of, I guess, the last podcast or whatever, is I just can't help it. And I think, I just walked into Thomas's spot, and I'm just he's just you have such a great design sense, and I can see that your entire being is focused on design and how do you say, composition. And I'm looking at your book stack there. I'm like, I got that book. So I don't know. I want to kind of throw it out at you, actually. Like mine is easy. I just can't help it. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, during my formative years, I was studying communication design, and that was the kind of point in my life. I had finished high school, and it was a terrible experience in high school. I didn't fit in at all, and then I went to art school, and like suddenly I fit in perfectly. And so, of course, all of the information and experiences that I had there, I was just really taking it all in, and that was really the point where I was becoming who I was, and that was all around communication design, and in some ways industrial design as well. And that was kind of the beginning of UX, when UX didn't exist but was just starting to exist, and that became part of who I am as well. Hard to shake that, that kind of is who I am.
They say that people sometimes they report a sense of belonging when they go into art museums. Isn't that interesting? I feel like somehow being around creative outputs and other creative people, for some people, especially creative people, is very, soothing.
Definitely for me. So number 4 is the one that I say is a tough one. It's what does your future look like?
I'd say I remember the last time I recalled was, I guess we were talking about AI again. I just keep talking about AI. Is that, what does everyone's future look like with AI? So I'll just continue some of that thought. So what does the future of everyone look like with AI? The recent, I guess, developments and papers and things that have been published they're starting to get a lot more thoughtful with people's thoughts and understandings of it, especially developments in policy. So that's been really cool, seeing that a lot of governments and large organizations are starting to see the importance of putting regulations, frameworks, like ethical frameworks around data and data's use with AI and all of that. I mean, even Vancouver, I don't know if you saw that, Kenson Lemaire just started a new position for like some sort of AI kind of grandmaster or whatever for the city, which is pretty cool. And so all of that changed actually since the last time we spoke. And so I think there's a lot of progress there. So I think my thoughts on the future of it, because last time we were talking, I was kind of worried actually. I was really worried about, oh my God, what's everyone going to do, with job loss and all of this. I still feel a little bit apprehensive about it, but I'm starting to feel so much better about where things are going in terms of regulation, in terms of our governments and large organizations really considering this. Like it's been a great couple of weeks. I think when it comes to that, Europe just announced new policies on the control of AI, and the policies seem, especially for the initial versions of it, because I guess these things will always be iterative, seem responsible without being too restrictive, and that that's the biggest part about getting people to actually comply, right? Is to keep it from being too restrictive. We were talking a little bit before about what was the author again of that? Yuval Harari, right? Were we? Did we talk about Sapiens and
okay.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Is that his first name, Yuval Harari? Does that make sense?
I don't remember talking about that specific person.
But it's the right author, right?
It could be, yeah.
Okay. So he had a really great thing that was released on. He had a great talk at some conferences on YouTube about a week ago, maybe a week and a half ago, and yeah, it's great. It was great to see someone of his stature mention it. You know, because he's a well-known author. Maybe not so well-known that maybe I screwed up his name, but yeah, no, I love that AI is getting a lot of attention. Yeah. How about you? What do you think changed since the last time we spoke?
Well, you know, I mean, to play into what you're saying, I'm glad to hear that that kind of fear around AI is less central to what you're thinking now, and more there are these other areas emerging. I mean, for me, you know, one thing that happened was that Meta Verified came through.
Okay. Yeah.
And so I got my blue check mark on Facebook and Instagram, and I was like, okay, cool, that's good. And I was like, okay, they're going to be able to help me to be authentic, and so everybody knows. But I was also a bit like, I wonder if AI is playing a role in this. I wonder if they're going to scrape more information for an AI or something like that, if that could happen more. And you know, kind of the news came through a while ago now about Bing using AI in their search engine, and now even when I'm using Google, I'm thinking, you know, Google's got to be doing this too. I mean, Bing came through the news, but what are all these other platforms that are using AIs now that just don't make the news, but they're doing it? It must be everywhere. And you know, I feel, you know, with the kind of search results and things like that, there must be some element to this. That's very much where I'm thinking future focused is more and more of that, and you know, more and more of this kind of conversation. You know, the AR headset came out from Apple since we last talked, and some people are talking about that as mainly not people interacting, but a human interacting with an AI for the most part. And I definitely wonder about that too. And if everybody's wearing these ski goggles all the time, then you know, how much of our lives are AI focused?
There's some interesting things there. I think one thing that came out, because it sounds like you're concerned about, you know, putting your data out there and what that will do to these models, and who's monetizing, who's making money off of your content. An interesting article just came out maybe 5 days ago, 3 days ago. It was an article about how AI is trained on AI-generated content actually break the models. So it's like, I think the name of the article is kind of like the curse of recursion. So it's just, it's like a remix of a remix will eventually break the model. You know what I'm saying?
I do know,
Yeah. And so I think that's kind of awesome in a way, and I think that supports some of the thought around the value of novel data, and it's also, it reinforces the fact that we as humans, it reinforces our value, I suppose, you know, because we create we make novel experiences because they're our own. And so, I think it's going to be an interesting time. It already is, actually. I'm still, even as I'm speaking, I'm like, there's something there that I just said that actually I think we could come back to. But yeah, no, I really feel like there's something very positive that can come out of this. Something positive about, it's like, you know, if we were to discover aliens, right? It would have us look deep inside ourselves, right? As to see like what about us? What makes us special? All of these questions, you know, these existential questions that we haven't had in a really long time. And so AI is another one of those moments where it's just like, hey, is this thing? Now we start asking ourselves, what makes us special? You know, why haven't we fixed things like like poverty. You know what I mean? We have like that's in our that has been in our grasp for some time. It's like why haven't we done these things? Why do we continue to pollute the environment? Why do we discriminate against these these certain groups of people that are either underrepresented or have been discriminated in the past? Like all of these like moral things that have been just swept under the rug because of the commerce or because of bias or because of all of these things. Now that AI is here and it is a big deal, then we can at least take a look at and examine ourselves, and our behavior.
Well, yeah, I mean, one of the great things that I find about AI is that it allows us to revisit all of these questions that are very tangential and arguably not related to AI, but we now think, oh, okay, in this AI context, what happens with this, what happens with this, what happens with this? And maybe it's all different actually now, so this is super interesting. So number 5, let's talk about location. How does the notion of place play into what you do?
No, this is interesting. This is interesting. So last time I got somewhat out there with my answer, I was like, oh, okay, well, location is really important. I started getting into space and time, and then a little bit into that makes something unique and all this. Okay, great, fine. Let's switch gears altogether and get super tactical. Vancouver. Why did I leave in the first place and move to California to go to design school? Why did I live in the States for 15 years and then come back and all of these things? And maybe, so that's again really tactical, but maybe a little bit more of a approachable question. So again, how important is location? I'm going to be really blunt, if that's okay. Yeah, so Vancouver is an awesome place, as we know. There's just not a lot of great creative opportunity here, right? For certain things. I mean, I don't want to be controversial. I know there are a lot of people working in that space here, so I don't want to downplay any of that great work that they're doing to promote the creative industries here. But I mean, let's be blunt about it. It's just we just have a lot of industry here. We just don't have the population. We don't have that infrastructure. So I had to leave in order to get my A, design education, and B, to get the foundation of my work in. And it just so happens that, I mean, that's just the way it is. And then you start seeing companies, like there's an apparel company here that is hiring a bunch of people, and they have a special deal with the government that says, we can hire people outside because there's maybe not enough talent here in Vancouver to do that. And so there are knock-on effects of that, I just say this, obstacles to having decent training and careers here in Vancouver. And I'm not saying that's like, for that company to do that, I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying it's a bit unfortunate that designers here in Vancouver may be overlooked because of this. There are a lot of designers in Vancouver, and there are a lot of creative people that gave up on being designers. Now you can see why I'm getting worked up now because my hands are moving. There are a lot of creative people here that went to Emily Carr, that went to all these other, good schools that wanted to be creative, and they had to give up on their. And now my voice is breaking up because it's making me a little bit upset. They had to give up on their careers because there just wasn't that industry here, or they had to leave. And I don't know, I think that's really tragic, you know what I mean? Like that's, I mean, Vancouver's a great place, man. And it's just, and I think people that grow up here in Vancouver, we're exposed to nature. We have these great, despite what some people say, we have a sense of community and belonging and, the social contract that we have with each other. Again, despite what some people would say, some people, you hear that, right? People in Vancouver are cold and this, that, and the other, whatever. But, for the most part, people are pretty nice, and we, again, great respect for nature, which is absolutely critical, an appreciation for people. We're a diverse place. I think people here in Vancouver have something to say and contribute, and should contribute on a larger stage. And I think those opportunities are being somehow, not necessarily being withheld from them, but they're kept from them somehow.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and there's just, it's so frustrating to see. I used to teach at Emily Carr as well, right? And so it's just seeing students, you know, give up on their passions is just, it's gut wrenching, you know, to see that. Yeah, I don't know. What are your thoughts? You're an educator. I mean, am I on the wrong? Am I going?
No, you're right. I mean, it's weird. Like, I think it comes back to some kind of conversation around community and the way that community happens in Vancouver. I mean, we had a great guest on the audio podcast, Connor Lowe, and I was recently chatting with him and discovered that he was one of the early kind of pioneers behind the UX department at Lululemon.
Okay.
Or no, sorry, at Aritzia. And I just discovered him as a creative who's living on Bowen Island now, and I was like, oh, Bowen Island, that's super interesting. Maybe I'll reach out to him, and then discovered that he has this whole kind of design work history in Vancouver, and I think that there is some community that emerges in Vancouver, but I think that it doesn't kind of gel in the way that it does in some other places, and so people actually don't know all of the stuff that's going on or what each other is doing. I feel like there's a lot of this kind of like under the carpet stuff that's happening that we just aren't exposed to. And for a long time I held a similar view to you, that it just wasn't there, and now I'm like, maybe it's there and I just don't see it.
No, absolutely. I totally agree with you. I think my problem is that why is it so hard for us to see it? You know, that's the thing, right? I agree with you. There is stuff there, but why is it so hard for us to see it? And unfortunately, and this goes for a lot of this design in general, it's like the people that can afford to take these risks, you know what I mean, are usually of a certain type. You know what I mean? It's you know, they can take risks. You know, they can afford to, you know, not work or whatever for a certain amount of time so that they can, you know, get their teeth cut in the industry and do these things. You know, it's like what they say, like in Los Angeles, they used to say that if you're writing a screenplay, everybody you'll like die of all the support you'll get. If you're in Vancouver and you try to do the same thing, you'll die of indifference. And it's kind of, I feel like it's like that because you can't. It's difficult to connect the creative to industry here because there's just not enough industry here. You know, I mean, obviously, I don't want to downplay a lot of these other movements and people are supporting and trying to do these things. 100%, like hats off to you. Keep it up. I just wish that your work would accelerate and that you get the resources that you need and the acknowledgement that you need, because I think the work that all these people are doing is extremely valuable. It's just, I think we need to call it out and feel like, hey, government, hey, institutions, like let's find a way to focus on local economy, like some type of local creative economy. It's BS now that you can't find a studio in the city to work in, you know what I mean? I mean, not everyone is as lucky as you to have such a Pinterest studio, but like, yeah, it's tough to find a place. Certain things are expensive. Anyway, we could go on about
No, but you're right. I mean, you know, we had Dr. Garnett Hertz on the show who goes to the skate park and does graffiti and finds his sense of community in doing that. And I think it is very authentic and true that he truly likes that, and he would do it no matter how the community aspect of it played out. But it is kind of alarming that a Canada Research Chair and Associate Professor at a university has to go to a skate park to find community and do graffiti to find community. Like, is that, I mean, are we scrounging at that level now? Wow. You know, so it's kind of weird. So number 6 is, if you had to start from the beginning, what advice would you give your former younger self?
A lot of these, you know, a lot of the things that I think are benefiting me now wouldn't have happened unless I made these like just brutal mistakes, right? I made a lot of mistakes. And so I don't think I'd give up on them. I don't think I'd go back and say, hey, shortcut these mistakes. Like don't experience that problem because it's the way you really learn. I mean, to be immersed in that problem, to actually be in the problem, that creates changes in your brain that are going to be essentially hardwired. And there are lessons that you don't soon forget. And so the more difficult the situations that you're in, the more deeply you will be learning. I'm just starting to think about times when things were really tough for my family and I, and it's just like, hey, you know what? I don't think I would trade those times in for other things, because they made me who I am. I'm a lot more thoughtful about that. I think maybe this would resonate with people who may be listening to the show who have children, where if you're, so I have a 9-year-old at home, and so I'm in the middle of it, but when he was younger, just thinking back about how hard it was, especially the first 2 months of that, it was brutal, man. Like, I mean, people who have kids don't, we try not to tell maybe people about this too much because it maybe discourages them from having kids. But it's like maybe one of the hardest times of my life. And the thing is, like, would I trade that? Would I change that? And the answer is no. Like, it's really no. I wouldn't want to go through it again, but I see the value in it. And so, so I'm kind of sidestepping the question, but in a way, maybe that's kind of the point, I suppose.
Great, okay, number 7, what's a day in your life like?
Oh, yeah, I was just talking about this with my wife today. I need to find a way to change this because it's like, it's not great. Things with the industry that I'm in have been crazy recently, and so the work-life balance thing is not super great. I mean, I'm looking forward to shutting off this weekend. It's Father's Day weekend, so this is like literally the best time of year for me. That is better than my birthday, and so I'm looking forward to shutting off. But a day of my life is literally wake up, roll out of bed. I try to get some coffee in and get some, just try to wake up. And then usually scramble for my first meeting. Because I've gotten to the point where I can put stuff together very quickly. But anyway, I cut it pretty close. So sorry if you're a client and you're hearing this. So literally that was being put together 10 minutes before we started talking. But I mean, the ideas, I guess, are more important sometimes than how that's put together. And then and then I'll like maybe take a break and then just get at it again. I'll try to fit in a workout in the day, and then work again. And half my team is in Asia, so take night meetings and go on until I get way too tired, and then shut her down, and then scramble again for the next morning. I'll try to watch news, which is the worst thing you can do, right? Because it's super depressing, right? And then so I need to break the cycle somehow. I mean, the weekends are great, but I need to find a way to I don't know. Burnout is a big deal, especially for people that were working in AI ethics early, like a year ago or so. And I don't work in ethics, but it's something that's kind of on my plate. So. I don't want to burn out. I'm really worried about it because the thing is, if you burn out and take a month off, then everything's going to change. So it's really tough, really, really tough. Right. How about you? You know what? So what do you do? I want to know.
Well, it's so funny, right? Like I guess yesterday morning I had a Zoom meeting. Thank goodness for Zoom to kind of cut down some of the legwork in getting to some of these meetings, but I literally rolled out of bed and then got in front of the computer and was slur talking because I was just waking up in the Zoom meeting. So I have to send an apology to the person who was talking with later on. But it's very weird post-pandemic, the kind of lives we have and the kind of we'll get to the work-life balance question, but the kind of blurriness between work-life and the way that the Zoom meetings have changed our lives kind of permanently. I mean, I don't know if they're not going away or not anymore. I don't know what the state of that question is at now. We're here in person in the studio doing this recording, so it's pretty magical to be in this post-pandemic phase. And our AI panel was in person, and there must have been 100 people in the audience there. It was pretty wild. So maybe that's. But then now you're juggling the Zoom meetings and then these in real 100-person audience meetings, and it's very kind of like what's going on kind of thing, and how will the future evolve like that. So that's how I'm feeling.
Yeah, so that's been in the media quite a bit now,
Yeah.
right? Like all these companies switching out of remote and hybrid and back into the office.
That's right.
I have to confess that when it was going to the office, I got a lot more work done. Like a lot more. But at the same time, I don't know if I was happier. Maybe I was. Man, I was spending a lot more money. I was, right? I mean, because you go out for drinks with your friends after or something, or you buy clothes for work. Like all of these things, you spend money on lunch, you just like, and so I can see how, we've been like, it's in the media, right? It's just like, okay, downtowns are hollowed out now, all office buildings are, there's less occupancy and all of that. There's a lot of truth to that. And so unfortunately, and it's gonna sound bad, but because there's some things about remote work I really like, right? For sure. But yeah, maybe we have to go back to the office. I don't know. It's tough. That's a tough one. I think we need to all look deeply inside of ourselves and find out if that's the right thing.
I was chatting with Angela Fama, who is on the In-Person podcast as well, and she's running workshops kind of in a similar vein to the way that I'm running workshops now. And we're talking, I'm like, people want to come out. They want to come out to the in-person. They're willing to spend a bit more money, maybe because they have more extra money because they're doing stuff from home.
Oh, okay.
And like you said, they're not buying the clothes. They're not going for the beers as much, so they can invest more heavily in that once in a while in-person thing that they're doing.
Sure.
But it's very much like, where are we? What are we doing? Where's the rule book for this? Because there clearly isn't one,
Right.
Yeah, so it's super interesting.
Yeah.
So let's move to the next question. So lifelong learning is a popular topic. How do you stay up to date?
Yeah, I built the whole performance management thing for my team, right? So I actually had to specify this for other people, and so I had to eat my own dog food, so to speak, sometimes. But so for the team, I get them to obviously share, and I put it into their goals, share how they work their AI framework for work, for design. Because it's basically built into one of their competencies is using AI in their work, design work. And then so share that from time to time with the team, so they're learning from each other. And then also, obviously there's some online classes and workshops that I specify them to take. One of which, especially for designers, is super important, even before AI, is just data fundamentals, working with data, even just understanding the limitations and the value of a spreadsheet and rows and columns, and how to break up data that way so that it's more machine friendly and readable, and why that's useful. Super important for people that are working with data and AI, especially if you're working in UX and dealing with that. And some of your clients are, in industries that are in the middle of some type of digital transformation, and so you need to know. You have to have a certain foundational understanding of data and how it's best structured, the different types of data. Anyway, I could go on. It's somewhat dry, but off topic, right? And then I guess the other things are, I'm just legitimately interested in all this stuff anyway. So I don't know if you notice, but your feed, right? Like when you wake up in the morning and you get on your phone, like what is in your feed, right? And so I'm constantly bombarded with it because of what I'm looking at. So podcasts as well. I'm like listening to podcasts, watching YouTube videos and all the treadmill kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so it's just constantly the new, like what is the newness in terms of AI and technology?
Yeah.
And it just doesn't stop. And it's okay because we're designers, right? So it's just like a vocation.
Yeah.
And so I'm just like eating all of this stuff.
Yeah.
How about you? I mean,
Well,
how do
'cause-
you stay up to date?
So I was on Netflix. So I resubscribed to Netflix. So everybody went through this thing where they're like, we're gonna cancel our Netflix, and everybody canceled their Netflix.
Is it a password thing?
I don't know, maybe. I'm not sure. But I secretly resubscribed the other day, and so there's this new Black Mirror thing where this office worker, kind of high up office worker, is watching Netflix. It's a Netflix thing, and she's watching Netflix and finds out that there's this Netflix thing about her, and it's about her whole life, and they're able to find out all of the information about her life and put it into a show very quickly, maybe because of AI.
Wow.
And so she's watching this show about her life, like about what she did yesterday, and there's this character, I think it's Selma Hayek is playing her in the Netflix series. And so she's watching Selma Hayek do all this that she did in her life.
That's
And
great.
it's super freaky, and I'm like, oh no, this is gonna happen to me too. And this is great. She has to go to a lawyer, and this great clause in the document that says that they're allowed to make a Netflix show about you, like with no problem. It's totally legal. So she's dealing with like everybody in her life knowing about every step of her life. I kind of feel like that, like when I'm scrolling through social media, I'm like, what? They knew that, and they know that, and they know that. It feels like that sometimes. I mean, actually what it is just really general memes that apply to anything. But when you look at it, you're a bit like, oh shit, they know that too. So yeah, it's super interesting.
Yeah.
So I'm excited for this next question because of the AI angles. The question is around the tools that you use, and the analog tools and the digital tools.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if there's an AI element for that.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Like I said, with my department, it's actually built into their jobs now.
Yeah.
They have to use AI tools to augment their design work.
Yeah.
Because we are an AI company.
Yeah.
It'd be kind of weird if we didn't.
Yeah.
And it keeps them on top of the technology, right?
Yeah.
It is evolving very quickly, so it's just good practice. For me, so this is an interesting topic actually, because I tend to come at things from a very abstracted perspective. I'm not a technician. I mean, I'm technically inclined. I know enough to be dangerous, but I'm not going to be in there jamming away on like a Jupyter notebook, like doing Python to interact with these things.
Right.
I'm actually more interested in, again, philosophically, what does this mean for us as humans, and users and things like that, and specifically a non-technical end user. And so while I do mess around a little bit, I use the regular, ChatGPT plus interface. But I also use a bunch of different AIs too. So I'm using Bard as well, and I use Pi. I mentioned Pi before. I use Pi for more personal things, and these chatbots have different flavors, right? And so I think one thing too, prompt engineering comes up, right? A lot. And I don't get me wrong, I see a lot of value in those things, but once you start embedding code into the prompts, that's kind of when I stop seeing the sort of value in it, for me, in my practice at least, because it's just not how like a regular non-technical person would interface with these things, and you're kind of we're kind of going backwards, right? Because to me, this like natural language and chatbot interface is kind of like this, it's the everyman's almost universal interface, right? And it's like, that's actually that's what is driving my my philosophical curiosity, you know what I mean? And so, I can only say that because, an experienced designer at this stage in my career, but those are the kind of guardrails that I have with my practice in dealing with AI. It's like, I'm very human/AI focused and working in a very abstract, in a high level of abstraction, and I'm not apologetic for that. And because I've been down those rabbit holes, and that's not what I'm about, and that's not what I can contribute.
Mm.
You know, my Jeet Kune Do is that.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Like, I know myself. This is what I bring to the table, and yeah, and it enables me to start thinking about things like we were talking about earlier. You know, like why do this? You know, this more existential kind of thought.
And what about, yeah, that's good, but like, what about the physical? Like, you know, is the danger of AI gonna require us to go out and buy non-digital typewriters again, you know, to avoid something, to kind of try to escape it? Or, you know, are there any physical tools that might come into play because of AI, or are we shifting even more away from the physical?
That is awesome and worth digging into, again, from a extremely abstract or philosophy kind of thing. There was an old, I think it was William Gibson book. Do you remember his Neuromancer? Necromancer?
Neuromancer.
Neuromancer. Yeah. Remember there was that one part where it's just like, it's revealed that an AI put all of this thing into place so that they could manipulate a human person to get inside of a vault, you know, and because that was the only thing, that physical separation was the only thing needed to unleash the AI, right, or something like that. You remember that? There's like that piece.
It sounds familiar, yeah.
And so that idea of like exactly that parallels what you're talking about, where it's just like, hey, how do we separate ourselves from this typewriter? You know, it's kind of the same thing in a way, right? And so, no, it's an interesting, it's an art piece.
So even with the typewriter, the AI will find its way to get to your typewriter, kind of thing. Even though hypothetically, William Gibson-esque thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think this was months ago. Somebody asked an AI, how would you, you know, theoretically destroy or harm humanity? And it would be, it would somehow influence humanity, and so it would erode personal freedom gradually and over time, and that's the danger of it. And it would do so by essentially manipulating media and information. And so, yeah, it would just like how most malicious, like cybersecurity attacks or whatever, most of them are actually made or done by getting a human to do something. You know, it's not necessarily like some hacker doing all this code. It's more like, how do I get this user to reveal the password, to do these things, to click on the wrong thing, blah, blah, blah. Or it's these behaviors of legion. Yeah. Cybersecurity is super interesting, and I think that's going to be, especially with AI and machine learning, cybersecurity times that is going to be very, very fascinating.
Very interesting.
Probably already is.
Nice.
Yeah.
Halfway, number 10. How do you deal with work-life balance?
Oh yeah, we already touched on this one already.
Yeah.
So do you mind if we just skip that one?
Yeah, sure, no problem.
But you know what? I asked you that question, and I don't know that I got an answer from you.
Yeah. Well, it's you know, at one point I think the answer, the answer for that was that there's a kind of a blur, or that there's too much on the work side. Now I feel like the ambiguity around what is life and what is work is more pronounced, and so it's such a hard question to answer, because the definition of work or the definition of life has shifted so much that it makes it impossible to even communicate with that kind of nomenclature anymore. I think the idea of work/life is almost archaic. We can't even kind of address it anymore. We need new language, I think, to have a question like that now. That's my thought.
Nice, I like it. Yeah. But you know, some people though, they really have that though, right? Where it's just like, you know, I got to show up and I got to, you know, work in the shop or whatever, and then really cut it off, because it's just, I'm not meant to be, like, humans are not meant to be doing doing this thing. You know, I think you and I are both lucky enough to have a vocation where it's just like, you know, this is like the line is blurred and we're good. But it's just like some people, man, they show up just to make cash, right? And you know, like throw out a couple of examples or whatever. Folding shirts at the Gap or whatever. Does Gap even exist anymore? I don't know. But that used to be the ultimate retail job. I had it, but it was just, I remember being there and just, that's not a vocation. That's like something you did to make money. You know what I mean? So we're lucky enough to think that way, but how about these other people? You know?
If you weren't doing what you do now, what would you be doing?
Yeah, maybe something physical. Maybe something like we were just talking about, that I would be able to turn my mind off and like leave at the office kind of thing. Last time I mentioned I looked into being a cop or being like a paramedic or something like that, because it's just you're helping people. One would hope they turn it off when they get off their shifts and all this stuff. But yeah, something like that. I don't know. I have flirted with maybe volunteering for like Secret Service or military or something like that. Not because I'm into violence by any means, but it's just, it seems like important work these days. And you know, maybe I'm a victim of all the news that I watch, but I feel like you know, maybe some of these defense kind of concerns are more relevant these days. Yeah, politics is interesting. It's an interesting space, especially when it comes to technology. I think we've been really sheltered from that. I am by no means, you know, a war hawk, but I am, you know, concerned about, you know, my family and the continuation of a Canadian way of life. I mean, I don't want to get into politics too much because people get very passionate about it, and I tend to lean very left. But I think we can all agree that what we have here in Canada is super special, and I think maybe we need to do more to, you know, be reminded of how special that is, and things that we can do to support our way of life, protecting our way of life. It doesn't come up enough, and maybe I'm only thinking about this because, you know, I have a kid now and all of this, but you know, you see all the stuff that's happening in Eastern Europe, and yeah, it's a lot, and yeah, we just need to do our best, right? You know, I was really hoping that these things that are going on in Russia and things that, you know, that people talk about with China and all this stuff would somehow galvanize our identity as Canadians. I feel people should recognize that we do have a Canadian identity, and you only recognize that when it's under attack. And I think people should know that, right? Know that our way of life is under attack, and I think maybe the government's at fault with that as well. I mean, they haven't been very forthcoming with a lot of these, you know, foreign interference investigations and all of that. But there's got to be a way.
Well, it's city branding, right? Or country branding. You know, I mean, tragedy that Vancouver is going to be known as the place with ridiculous rents. I mean, we've just been talking about it for so long that it feels like that's going to be the only kind of consistent identity element of Vancouver, which is totally tragic. I saw this post come through that a one-bedroom costs $2,700 a month now. It's pretty funny. So yeah, let's work on that. Absolutely, I agree with you. Okay, so let's move to the next one. So what would you not like to do with your career?
I guess maybe like squander it. You know, I think about this all the time where, you know, the only thing that's holding me back from, you know, just being to participate more in the community and our economy is myself. Is my own lack of confidence, my own baggage that I carry as a, you know, racialized individual. Yeah, I think a lot about that. I'm Filipino by my background is Filipino. I'm Filipino-Canadian. I was born here, but I'm Filipino, and that culture and what colonialism has done to it is tragic in a way. And I feel I'm not blaming anything. I mean, I'm not blaming anybody for anything. You know, maybe there's a small part of colonialism that is about blame, but I do think that important to getting past it is to recognize it, right? Filipinos are an indigenous people, like at one point, and it was just so beaten out of them by repeated waves of colonization that it's resulted in the culture that we have now, and it's really unfortunate. And you know, sometimes I think, this came out when I was actually talking to an AI about this, is, you know, we were starting to get this argument about, you know, people and humanity and things like that, and my worldview is very heavily influenced by the fact that the group that I belong to had been or is currently, lack of a better word, is maybe enslaved by the system. You know what I mean? And what that means. Yeah. And again, it affects my worldview when it comes to AI. I mean, some of it has to do, and I was thinking about this, and I'm being very open now with you, is that everyone's afraid of what AI is going to do, you know, to our systems and humanity and all of these things. But how much worse is it going to be than what has been done to my people? You know what I mean? To our people, to racialized and colonized peoples. You know, is that a better master than the one that we currently have? Wow, I can't believe I said that in public. I'm going to get shot or something, aren't I?
Well, I think the point is, like, can AI have a positive outcome? I mean, why else would we pursue it in this way? I mean, there must be a possibility of a betterness through AI, right? Which we don't talk about enough, you know.
Yes.
We don't. So.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the thing. It's an unknown, right?
Yeah.
And so is the unknown,
yeah.
is that better than what we have now and the systems that we currently have? I would argue yes. Yeah. I would go for the unknown. Yeah. You know, in that way, I'm maybe a bit of an anarchist in a way, but it's just like, I would gamble that might be better than what we have, especially considering all the poverty we have, the inequality, you name it, the bias that we have, and especially if we can convince an AI and our society that, you know, data, like preserving unique data is important, and all of those unique data sets and people and experiences need to be protected. That is a better framework than what we have now.
And interestingly, like, as you said, things like poverty, things like disease, I mean, these problems that seem to be things that are within reach of solving are not being solved. So we know that they're there, and that this can happen in a good way. Maybe AI is our way there.
I think so.
Yeah.
I believe that a lot of our ways of thinking are shaped by our hardware, which are, you know, by our biology, and our biology was created and evolved to survive. And so there are certain things, certain behaviors, certain ways of thinking that are based off of survival. And because that is built into us, like built into our very cells, that we are not, may never be capable of rationally solving these kinds of problems. You know, I'm saying the crazy is hardwired into us. That's just I mean, I don't want to sound negative, you know, like, I mean, there are certain people, certain groups maybe that have, you know, can overcome this perhaps, but by and large, you know, because we need to think about every human, right? There's definitely going to be a few exceptions here on all fronts, but I think by and large, as a society, are we able to solve these problems, to overcome our biological handicaps is not a good word, but constraints. At this moment, I would say no. And so, yeah, these are the conversations I actually have with an AI, which is interesting. But And I'm sure some people think I'm crazy, but maybe I am.
Well, that's what we're here for. So,
That's funny.
never
Put the
think-
crazy guy on the podcast. Let's see how this goes.
Yeah, I was chatting with some of the past guests, and they're like, "Have you ever seen this?" I don't know if the audience is gonna know. Have you guys seen this? This hot wings.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
There's this interview / eating hot wings thing, which is super funny, and I was like, yeah, we should do that.
Yeah. Let's do that. Let's do that with shots of I don't know, gin or something.
Well, I was thinking about doing it with wasabi.
Ooh.
Like
taking
like one blob and then another blob. I think once you're at blob 10, it's quite difficult.
Yeah.
So 13, what's your favorite word, quote, or sentence?
Right now,
Yeah.
I'm going to screw up the quote because it's not really a quote. It's just kind of a paraphrase. It's I'm going to paraphrase it. It's things that look straight things that look straight at a certain point of view or nearby are actually curved when seen at a distance. So again, I'll say it again because I screwed it up the first time and the second time. Things that look straight when seen at nearby are actually curved at a distance.
You could almost use like a wide angle lens metaphor or something like that. Like with a wide angle lens, you get this kind of skewing.
Yeah, sure,
Yeah.
right, because you're just trying to see more stuff.
That's right.
Things are actually bent.
Yeah.
I was reading this book on cosmology, and it was about time and how time, when seen in small chunks, seems very linear, but when thought about it at a very, very extreme distance is actually curved. And then at a very, 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 very far distance, possibly curves in on itself. And it's just like, oh, okay. So you can apply that to a lot of things, especially for us as humans. We tend to see things as very cause and effect, right? And so in dealing with problems, I start to think about these things. Like some things are very black and white. No, this is the way it works because of that. And it's just like, but if you scale it out, then you start to be able to kind of explain things a certain way. You know, oh, okay, well, this is because of this and because of that. No, because society is like this. Oh, okay, this is because you were evolved to do this. And then so it ends up being this kind of crazy, things aren't always what they appear. And I actually tried to have a conversation with my 9-year-old son about this the other day, where he was like super, we were talking about religion, as we do with our 9-year-old kids. And he was like making fun of Catholicism because, you know, his grandma wants him to be a Catholic. And he's against it because he's half Japanese and approaches things in a more kind of agnostic way. And he was just like, this is ridiculous. You mean some guy's going to come back from the dead and he's like saves us and he's going to be on it. He's like, that doesn't make any sense. And he was frustrated about the whole thing. And I'm all like, hey, you know what? All these religions, they exist for a reason, right? And I said, you know, there are some indigenous religions that they believe the sun is their god, and other religions that they believe, you know, the raven is their god or one of the gods, and all of this stuff. And it's like those they have a lot to do with environments, you know. So, you know, the Aztecs and Mayans, they did a lot of farming, right? And so it's just like, okay, well, the sun, you know, if the sun, you know, you need that for the crops and all this stuff. So it makes sense. There's going to be some sort of god action happening over here, right? Pacific Northwest, there's probably a sun god, but it's probably less because it's just, you should have a rain god probably, but definitely more animal focused, right? And then not influenced by crop. And anyway, so I started talking about that, and I was just like, hey man, don't be so quick to judge. Try to understand, you know. And it comes back down to that, you know, things that we see up close. You know, this person is behaving like this. When you start moving back and you start seeing the whole thing, things are curved. You know, you can't explain behaviors and things like that.
Even Elon Musk, you know, or maybe it was an AI of Elon Musk, a deep fake, but he was saying, yeah, there's something bigger. He wouldn't say religion or he wouldn't say faith or anything like that, but he was like, there's definitely something that's governing all this. So. Interesting question. Okay, so number 14, what's your least favorite word closure sentence?
Least favorite?
Yeah.
At the moment? Oh gosh. There are a couple. They're more work stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, these cheesy work things that maybe I even say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there are a lot of those work things, you know, like let's circle back on this or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Like let's do a heat check and circle back on this, or let's do a, you know, bi-weekly touch base. Like,
Nice.
you know, these kind of phrases, they're brutal. They're brutal, and sometimes I hear myself say them, and I'm just like I can't believe I'm saying this cheesy office talk nonsense. Yeah, lots. I wish I could have more on
Nope, it's great.
deck, but, you know.
15, if you had to pick one word to describe yourself, what word would you choose?
Hopeful. Used to be frustrated, right? Last time it was frustrated. Now it's hopeful.
It's good.
Yeah.
Progress.
Yeah.
What keeps you up at night?
So that changed as well. So I am literally losing sleep over these things. UX for AI, it's an emerging type of field. I'm on the hook for coming up with a perspective for that for my company.
Awesome.
That again is emerging, something that it's a debt that I owe. Yeah, and so yeah, I'm literally losing sleep over that right now. Like, what are best practices for that? It's very easy to get really myopic and just be like, okay, chatbot. You know, what are best practices for chatbot? And because unfortunately, that's sometimes the depth at which my designers think about AI is, you know, it's like, what are best practices for a chatbot? But we were talking about this earlier. It's just like at an extremely high level of abstraction. It goes far beyond even just the input, but it's just like, what do we consider this thing to be? And and that's evolving and it's moving like over time, right? What are expectations? And, you know, the idea of, and this has always been a problem with machine learning, with trust. You know, how do users trust these things? So yeah, no, it's an evolving thing. But yeah, I'm literally losing sleep over that. Probably if I do have a stroke between now and July, the middle part of July, then it'll be because of this, because I haven't come up with something good enough to broadcast to my company.
Is design patterns part of that? Will design patterns kind of find a way into AI? I wonder.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That must be coming.
You know, I'm really good, and this is gonna sound weird, but
yeah.
I find I'm really good at giving prompts to a chatbot. You know, the reason why is because the critical thinking involved with the way I put design together. You know what I mean? Because that's part of design, critical thinking. Right?
Yeah.
Organizing things in such a way, and I So I think there's something there. I need to flesh it out again. Something to lose sleep over. But I encourage you, Thomas, as an awesome designer, to somehow work with an AI to replicate what you're trying to do. I mean, that's part of the reason I used to teach, right? It's because in teaching, you're verbalizing your practice, right, and process. And we had a small talk about this before, right? Super important. So with an AI, it's kind of the same thing. It's like you have this willing and able learning thing, and by interacting with it, you're growing because you're trying to give it the instruction, like really clear instruction as to what your expectations are, and that is so helpful for a designer, I think.
I agree. Okay, 18, what inspires you?
What inspires me? What's inspiring me right now? Oh man, last time I said it was young people, right? I'd go a little bit further and say, yeah, young people, but my son. My son inspires me a lot. He just so curious about things. You know, you get to see yourself a little bit in your kid sometimes, and that's pretty cool. And that obviously keeps you going. But he's also a little bit different. yeah, he just did like a tap. So he's into tap dancing,
Okay.
you know, and so he just did a tap. He was in a tap competition, and it's just so cool to see him. And he's 9, right? See him want to go through the tapes, you know, and just be like, okay, this is, I can improve this way, I can do that.
Nice.
At 9 years old, and it's really cool to see. Really cool to see that, and so that inspires me. Just young people, and my son in particular, I suppose.
Great. Last two. Any advice you'd like to share?
Okay, last time I said just start messing with AIs and stuff like that. Yeah, for sure. Okay, so that's there. I think the last one is, you know, and I say this a lot, but it's important to be nice to people, be kind to people. Yeah, just be kind to people around you. I don't know why it's so hard. Yeah, I don't know why it's so hard. I think with pandemic and things, and maybe even that things are getting expensive, and you know, there's the mental health thing, and you know, we were going through the winter, right? There was a lot of hate and stuff out there, and we just need to get better at like not hating each other. I mean, and realize that a lot of this hatred is fueled by, you know, this inequality that is something that we need to get over. It's something that we're all responsible for. Yeah, it's pretty scary out there sometimes, because I mean, I walk around downtown a lot. Our office is downtown,
Right.
and we have friends that have a restaurant in on the downtown east side, and it's, man, like just to see the anger that is out there, you know, like the actual anger, and especially directed at, you know, minorities or whatever, and things like that. We just need to get better at being nicer to each other. And maybe the way that these people are thinking is that, you know, society needs to be nicer to them, and then so they're lashing out. So maybe it goes all ways. It's not just up to me to preach, but for society to be nicer to people itself. I don't know.
That's a good one. And number 20, how can our listeners keep tabs on you? What is our John Bondoc call to action?
John Bondoc call to action. Yeah, just reach out on LinkedIn. I'm easy. I don't post too much on social media. I made that decision a while back. But I just use LinkedIn just because it kind of keeps everything in one spot. I'm actually really curious about you know, yeah, going back to school actually and learning things, learning things as my, how do you say this? I think I'm at that point where I want to contribute to the writing, you know what I mean, by it, contribute new ideas, especially now that ChatGPT is there, it can fix my broken writing style. My writing style is very, anyway, you'll hopefully never see, but, but yeah, no, I reach out if you're in the podcast, and again, have a lab that's kind of interested in maybe taking on an old PhD candidate. I'm kind of down. And then otherwise, if you want to talk about AI stuff, yeah, just reach out on LinkedIn. I'm super down to talk. You know, novel experiences, new data, right? New data sets. Y'all are all new data sets. Super valuable. So yeah, I mean, I take pride in being, I like to think I take pride in being available and generous with my time with people. If anything, not just, I mean, if anything, just be respectful, but also I appreciate, I just appreciate the interaction. So John Bondoc, just reach out, LinkedIn, out of nowhere, do that thing.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you so much for joining. I'm super happy to hear about your new AI ideas, especially because last time I think we were all in this space where it was kind of like very scary and very much like this is not good. And now we're in a more of a evolved space where we're like, okay, you could try this, or this might work, or this might be worth our time. And you're kind of emphasizing that, and kind of your kind of cheerful demeanor this time is actually a big step for me to see in you for the podcast and for our listeners to be able to kind of listen and say, oh, this isn't all bad. There are good takeaways here. Let's try this. Let's try that. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Great.